morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to episode 106 of Rush Roundtable. This episode is a debate-style episode where we have 4 debaters, each one debating for a synth-era album of Rush, debating which one is more preferable. Signals, Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, and of course, Hold Your Fire. I'm now going to turn it over to my pal Jerry to introduce the participants.
What? No. You just do it.
All right, let's get to it. Let's first introduce our master debaters. So, battling for 1982's Signals in the top left-hand corner, he is a brand new father of a boy named Leo. This is Alex Nelson. Below him, bottom left-hand corner, battling for 1984's Grace Under Pressure. Put your hands together for Jim Benner. In the top right-hand corner, battling for 1985's Power Windows. He is really great at dancing. He has endless prizes around him of Power Windows merchandise. Put your hands together for Chris Springer. And last but certainly not least, he has a uphill climb here, battling for 1987's Hold Your Fire with a Hold Your Fire shrine behind him, Ralph Huffnagle. So now we probably should introduce the rest of the group, my backup band here down the middle. So first, in smack dab in the middle, always the star of the show.
Center square.
Center square, munching on those wheat thins. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Milton Banana. At the bottom, keeping time, he'll be utilizing hand gestures for letting the master debaters know when their time is up. Put your hands together for the guy from Ipanema.
Thank you.
And me, well, I'm Stan Getz. All right, so let's get to it. So first question, how this is going to work is we have 7 questions for our debaters, and 6 of the 7, each person will have 1 minute to answer. And the last question will be closing thoughts, closing arguments, whatever you want to call it. We'll have 2 minutes for that. We may allow rebuttals as needed. Those will be 30 seconds. And both Jerry and I, or as I introduced him, Mr. Milton Banana, and I will be, asking the questions. So let's get to it, shall we? First question here. So as passionate as Rush fans are about which album is the best, or in this case, the most preferable of the synth era, they are arguably more passionate about which album is the worst. I know we don't like to use the W word, or the least preferable. So subjectively speaking, which is the least preferable album of the synth era and why? Alex, we're going to start with you. You got 1 minute uninterrupted.
I think the least preferable album is Hold Your Fire. I know, shocking. But when I think about the singles from the album, they're pretty good. Time Stand Still is a great song. Prime Mover is also a great song, which was released significantly later after the album was released in 87. I think Prime Mover was released in 88. But the rest of the album has some low points, including the obvious Tai Shan, which many of the band members regret as something they maybe shouldn't have put on the album or maybe wrote it in a different way. But Hold Your Fire was in a really weird time in the synth era. It's 1987. It's pretty late. In the 80s, there was some weird stuff happening in music just in general. And I think the album suffers from a lack of, number one, a really strong hit. Number two, a couple of, kind of bummers, and then nothing really in between to really bring the album up to something, really spectacular.
All right, Jim, 1 minute uninterrupted.
All right. Well, I guess I should apologize to Ralph because I feel that the least preferable album of the synth era is Hold Your Fire as well. I think there's really amazing songwriting on the album, and there's some fantastic songs. Mission is great. It's been played live so many times. Prime Mover is one of my favorite Rush songs of all time. It is way up there. I love Force 10, and the drum fill at the end of Lock and Key is incredible. But I think what that album kind of suffers from a couple things. First of all, it didn't rank as high as the others. So on the Billboard Top 100, or the U.S. Billboard, all of our other synth albums ranked number 10. Hold Your Fire ranked 13. So a little bit lower. That's, from the fans, because that's based on purchases. And there were songs that were not really well received. Tai Shan obviously being one, and I think High Water is kind of another one. So a little bit of misses probably there just from the fan acceptance, but some really good songwriting on it as well. So a little bit of both.
All right, Chris, 1 minute uninterrupted.
Okay, well, I don't like answering these questions, and I will just say right off the bat that I love every single one of these albums, but I'm going to have to disagree with myself and say that the least preferable would have to be Hold Your Fire. And this is not my view, but I just think that in Rush world, that album went too far. And I think that the members of the band think that it went a little bit too far. I mean, Neil used those words in Beyond the Lighted Stage. If you listen to Hemispheres and Hold Your Fire, it's a completely different band. And I think that whatever people had, the people who had a problem with the synth era, some of them could deal with the others. And I think that they thought that Hold Your Fire went too far. I don't care. I think it's incredible. I don't think it's the best of the era, but I think it's incredible. And that's it. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm out.
Good timekeeping.
All right.
You should take my job.
All right.
Well, Ralph, with the tall task ahead of him, go ahead. 1 minute uninterrupted.
All right. Well, obviously, I'm here to defend Hold Your Fire. I think it's a great album. And as far as the synth era goes, and the use of synths in Rush era, I'm going to have to pick Signals. Great album, a lot of great songs, but they were using synths, starting to experiment. I think it's got one of the weakest openings in a Rush album. That's just don, 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 don. Great song, but just I don't think that transposed live very well. I don't think it, kept up with it. I think on Signals, a lot of the keyboards, were just accents. They weren't a big part of the album. We're just starting to use it. It's kind of rudimentary. Geddy's just starting to really use it part of as his ensemble. So that's my pick.
All right.
Okay. Next question is, Rush have always pushed themselves to be the best musicians and songwriters they can be, and are by far one of the most influential bands of all time. Duh. What about the musicianship and songwriting on your album stands out among the other albums of Rush's synth era? And this time we'll start with Jim. You have a minute.
Okay. Well, on Grace Under Pressure, the songs are shorter. There is no song that is over 6 minutes. It's a combination of upbeat and mid-tempo songs, right? So when I think of upbeat, songs, I think something positive. I think this provides a great contrast to the dark lyrics that are prevalent throughout all of Grace Under Pressure. I love that contrast, and the songs are catchy, right? If you look at After Image and Kid Gloves, I think they are catchy, and in Rush form, I guess, all of these songs sound like they go together. And on Grace Under Pressure, there is not one song to me that sounds like it should be on a different album. So it's really coherent songwriting. But there are still complexities, plenty of time signatures that they've woven into there. And there's some little hidden gems that are very difficult to play. So I think they've done a great job with the songwriting on that one.
All right, Chris, you're next. You have a minute.
All right. Well, they've always done their own thing, but one could always hear the influence of what was going on around them. And Power Windows represents their pop album. You know, they did their version of prog, their version of you know, reggae and things like that. This is their version of pop. Songs are catchy. Getty continued to distance himself from that screaming banshee of the 70s, which suited that music fine, but they were changing and he went with it. It was the first time he really started incorporating harmonies. The vocal arrangements are fantastic. I think he shines throughout this whole album. Could be his finest overall best vocal performance of the entire career. He always said he was writing more comfortable. It was felt more comfortable writing on keyboards than on guitar, and that shows. From the irresistibly catchy Grand Designs to the soaring crescendo at the end of Marathon to the achingly beautiful Middletown Dreams. I think the Signals and Grace Under Pressure don't quite reach that blend of keyboard and guitar that Getty talked about was so perfect on this record. And again, Hold Your Fire may have gone too far. So Power Windows sits right in that sweet spot.
All right, Ralph, you have a minute.
So I think Hold Your Fire was the apex of the synth era to transition back to the, you know, getting back into the more guitar. They, you know, they had a huge success with moving pictures, obviously, and they weren't just going to repeat that. So they, you know, started with Signals and Grace Under Pressure, great albums, and Power Windows. And then finally they figured out what they were trying to do with the synthesizers, with the technology, the electronic percussion that Neil was using. They were going, and they were able to go with a cleaner sound. It wasn't as distorted as most of them have been. So they could really get into the nuances and the songwriting of that they were building up for. You know, as a bassist, I think Getty really hit his stride with this album. The bass lines were strong, melodic. They kept, but they were still undertones. They didn't overtake the songs. A big part of it, Alex really learned how to texture his guitar into those songs.
Okay, Alex, you have a minute.
When it comes to Signals, everybody thinks subdivisions, but there's so much more to the album than just that one song. Now, granted, behind Tom Sawyer, Subdivisions might be the biggest fan favorite for a lot of reasons. It's catchy. It's got a great story. It's a story that most fans can really relate to. And plus, on top of that, the songwriting and the musicianship on that one song alone is enough to carry, the entire album. But then you've got Digital Man and Analog Kid and Chemistry and Losing It. Losing It had one of the best reactions when played live ever before, because it just wasn't something that they ever did. So that song, it being a huge fan favorite, being hugely popular, also has incredible musicianship and incredible lyrics and songwriting. So I think just from an overall standpoint, with all of the great songs on Signals, it stands out as the best, simply because of the strength of Subdivisions and then the follow-up tracks on the rest of the album that are just absolutely amazing.
All right. So next question here, moving on. Neil's lyrical themes shifted from album to album, but really started to take off during the synth era. Tell us why the lyrical themes from your album stand out more than the lyrical themes from your opponent's albums. We will start with Chris and Power Windows, 1 minute uninterrupted.
Well, I just think that the themes of this album are more clearly defined, or the most clearly defined of these four. I think it's one of the most complete theme albums, or concept albums, I guess you could call it, of the collection. And all about power, whether it's power of money, power of imagination, power of creativity, power of power, atomic power. Power of the human condition and endurance and all of that, the power of dreams and where they can take you. That's a common theme that Neil has come back to a lot of times, with people needing to get out. But I definitely think it's the most complete, and every song is connected by that thread of power. It's kind of like in the same way that Roll the Bones is very connected, all of those songs. So Oh, look, I 4, 3, 2, 1 a little early today. Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. Ralph, and hold your fire. 1 minute uninterrupted.
All right. Yeah, agree with Chris. Power Windows is a great theme. And I think Neil was actually able to expand upon that on Hold Your Fire. He went from more science fiction, more fantasy, to the more personal primate instinct, temperament of humans trying to get along in this world. And I think each song is a theme on that, from Force 10, trying to get through every storm, Time Stands Still, just trying to enjoy each moment, to, staying with friends, fighting with your partner, wanting a perfect world, but knowing that's not going to happen. Just how we get through each day, whether you're standing on top of a Chinese mountain, going through the sea, trying to read the news and deal with it, even if you have to just turn the page. I think that theme was through every song on this album. So.
All right. Alex and Signals. 1 minute uninterrupted.
The interesting thing about the lyrics on Signals is that there's a very much kind of an arc to the lyrical direction in every song. Subdivision starts out with a very relatable story about growing up in the burbs, which many Rush fans can definitely relate to. And then Analog Kid and Digital Man have very much relatable kind of social commentary themes that is very understandable and very interesting. And then New World Band, which was almost an afterthought, ends up being the highest charting single in the band's history, ending at number 21 on the chart. So obviously, lyrically, that song meant a lot to people, besides how catchy the rhythm is and how upbeat it is. And then ending it with Losing It, which is a very emotional song, and Countdown, which is an awe-inspiring song that everybody thinks about NASA and the space shuttle. Lyrically, this album is incredibly powerful.
All right. Jim, 1 minute uninterrupted.
All right. A lyrical theme for Grace Under Pressure is pressure, and how humans react to it and are influenced by it. And given that this album was written in 1983 and 1984, released in 84, there is a very apparent Cold War kind of arc to it as well. But there's all different kinds of pressure we're dealing with, right? If you look at Distant Early Warning, that is obviously about the Cold War, right? It is something that was on everybody's mind back then. I lived through it. So yes, Red Lenses and Between the Wheels, also dealing with Cold War. Red Lenses talking about, finding the Reds under my bed. Everybody was afraid of that. The Enemy Within and Kid Gloves dealing with pressure related to social groups and being detached from them. And of course, Red Sector A dealing with the horrible ordeal for World War II. Very dark theme there for pressure, but quite interesting.
Okay, the 80s saw a rise in the use of keyboards and synthesizers in popular music of the time. Rush also followed suit and introduced a new sonic palette. Tell us why the use of synthesizers on your album makes it much better than that of your opponents. And this time we'll start with Alex. You have a minute.
Signals is a great balance, I think, between the rock and roll 70s that Rush is, progressive rock that Rush is so well known for, and the synth era 80s. It's not too heavy on the synth. It's not too heavy on the classic rock and roll or progressive rock and roll sound. It strikes a very good balance. And most importantly, the balance of using synthesizers not as a primary instrument on every song. It does it signals a primary instrument on a couple of songs, but it's not the entire album, where Geddy would literally, if they played the album from start to finish, would be doing nothing but standing in front of his keys. It's a good balance where it goes back and forth between the two. Guitars still play a major role, which is great. Drums are obviously second to none on Signals. But the keys end up and the synths end up being a very nice complement to the classic progressive rock and roll sound that Rush obviously mastered in the decade before.
Okay, Jim, you have 1 minute.
All right. So the blend of the guitar, the bass, and the synthesizers on Grace Under Pressure, I feel is a little bit more balanced than it is on the other albums of the synth era. The band has, and especially Alex, has actually stated that there was a little bit less synths and he was being able to play more guitar, that the synths were not taking up that same sonic spectrum that guitar was. They were a little bit more highs and lows. So it's really a great blending of it. Every instrument has a chance to shine, and there are synths in the forefront as well, but not all the time, not so much, not like on some of the other albums. And the synths are a little bit more complementary and they're definitely not taking over anything. So I think they've reached a great balance of the different instruments on this one.
Okay, Chris, you have 1 minute.
All right. Well, right off the bat, Getty said that this was the best blending of keyboards and guitar. And he was right on the money. And I would compare that opening chord of Big Money to the opening note of Tom Sawyer in terms of its power. I mean, there's nothing wimpy about that guitar chord, and the way that drum comes in, that snap of that, you know. And then the way Alex answers the keyboard, the na 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 na. There's a ton of that throughout the entire album. The interplay between the keys and the guitar in Middletown Dreams during that middle-aged Madonna part, the way he's playing those syncopated chords that matches with that sequencer perfectly. If he got buried anywhere, I mean, it was not on this album. And I would say that you could argue that Signals or Hold Your Fire actually was a little bit more burying of Alex, because the keyboards, I think, in the songs where there are keyboard heavy, Alex gets a little bit drowned out in there. And I just think that the guitar is very upfront on this album, along with the keys. Everything's a perfect blend.
Okay, Ralph, you have 1 minute.
Well, if we're talking the synth era, I think Hold Your Fire is definitely the most appropriate album to talk about. They were experimenting with it. They were getting there with Power Windows and Hold Your Fire. They really were getting beyond Getty just doing his one note melodies, kind of do. And really, he took piano lessons before they recorded Hold Your Fire. So you can really feel the full confidence of the keyboards in their songwriting, in the songs. And Alex, if you might need to listen a little more, but he's there. He's not guitar riffs, but he's learning how to layer and texture the guitar sound in songs. And I think it benefits this album and every album after this. It's a great synth, the highlight of their synth era, and then moved on after that.
All right, so every single one of you spoke about Alex and how he kind of worked his way around the keys in answering that last question. So let's talk about Alex Lifeson seemingly kind of taking a back seat to the synths, because that's kind of what, seemingly he felt. He kind of took a back seat to the synths. So we often state that Alex picks his spots perfectly, and has recorded some very heartfelt guitar solos during what we deem the synth era. So tell us which Alex guitar solo is most preferable on your album and why it stands out to the other standout solos on your opponent's albums. We're going to start with Ralph and Hold Your Fire. 1 minute, uninterrupted.
Well, the unique thing about Hold Your Fire is that there's more songs without guitar solos than there are with actual guitar solos. And even the guitar solos themselves are kind of short, relatively speaking. There's a great guitar solo on Mission, and it's probably about 3 bars until the band kicks in with this great chaotic, Gil's got his marimbas going on the electronics, and it kind of reminds me of La Via Strandiato, a little chaotic, and then finally it just crashes. Open Secrets, you know, it starts with the high shrill, goes a lot of noise, maybe the arguments about between two people, that's what it reminds me of. And High Water, it's not a lot of notes, but it's got these long drifting notes that just take me out on the sea on a boat, just floating around, just long notes. And so I think there aren't many guitar solos, but what he does is great as always. They just fit the song.
So if you had to pick just one, what is the most preferable?
High Water.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Chris and Power Windows, 1 minute.
All right. Well, I just explained that I don't think that director, the solos are absolutely no exception. There's several that stand out. Marathon also reminds me a little bit of La Villa, the way that the mood shifts in the keyboard and it starts kind of a slow, but in a different way kind of thing, and then builds to a frenzy. It's not as frenzied as La Villa, but you know. Grand Designs is another, the way that the solo kind of carries out underneath that last vocal going into that last verse against the run of the mill, and he's playing against it and then got that really super high note. But I think the standout is a Motion Detector. It's a true band solo. It's one of the rushier moments on the record. And it's kind of funny because it's recorded in a different way. Alex was using a lot of effects, different bass. It doesn't sound like old Rush band solos did, but if you listen to it, it's crazy. And it's in the middle of an otherwise kind of mellow song. And it's great. So that's Power Windows standout.
Yet again, he beat the time. Okay. Jim, the most preferable guitar solo from Grace Under Pressure. 1 minute.
Okay, well, I had a really long debate with myself that lasted about 1 second. That song is Between the Wheels. That song has very, very prominent synths and keys throughout it. But once that solo comes in, it is pure power trio, guitar, bass, and drums. Alex builds that solo. It's like he's easing into it, right? He builds it and it gets more exciting until he hits those high notes. And he's got a few repeating phrases that he does. And he keeps the solo. The first half is just guitar, bass, drums. The second half, the keys come back in, but he's still soloing over that keyboard medley or melody, not medley, melody. And I think it just sounds beautiful. It sounds great. And this is to me, is a very passionate solo. It is definitely my favorite solo off that album.
All right. Alex, Signals, 1 minute, uninterrupted.
It's easy to point to the solo in Subdivisions since it's such a popular song, such a well-written solo. It's very, very melodic. But actually, I think the best solo on the album is Analog Kid. It's lengthy. It's very technical, very fast. And Alex uses a harmonicizer pedal or a harmonic pedal or whatever you want to call it, harmonizer pedal, to create really interesting intervals when he's playing one note, but the harmonizer is playing actually 3 notes in that particular solo. It's a long solo. It wraps up kind of the general theme of the song because the band goes into a repeat of the chorus right after that solo, and then the song goes into the outro. It's in a classic position in the song where it goes, they go verse, chorus, bridge, big solo to end the song. And if you go and check out people who have done covers of that solo on YouTube, you can just see how difficult and how spectacular that solo is. So Analog Kid wins the debate for all 4 of these albums, in my opinion.
Wait for the throat on that one.
Boy, might have to rebuttal, but it's hard to argue with. Analog Kid solo is incredible. I will agree to that. Anytime
Alex's solo continued and keyboards came in, that was like
Oh, yeah.
So like what you were
Yeah.
talking about, that
Alex goes for the throw and everyone else is just gawking at the
Yeah, really.
kid solo.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Jerry,
All right.
go ahead.
Shows.
So Rush has quite a few songs that hardcore fans are passionate about, but are not well known to the general music community or to general Rush fans. So defined as having not having received the merit, recognition, or praise it deserves, what is the most preferable deep cut on your album and why? And let's go with Alex. You have a minute.
Yeah, the deep cuts, I definitely losing it. Never played live until the R40 tour. Very, very emotional song. A guest musician in the violin solo, Ben Mink. Gosh, forgot his name. There's some argument there for Countdown being the last song on the album, very much inspired by real life events with the space shuttle, but losing it has got to be the deep cut. It tells 3 really interesting stories about different people. The lyrics are very, very emotional, very moving, a little bit depressing, but there seems to be kind of like, a silver lining behind all those clouds throughout the lyrical theme. And if you were lucky, and to see this song played live in the R40 tour, I mean, how amazing would that have been? That's just off the charts. Awesome.
Okay, Jim, you're next. 1 minute.
All right. It's always hard for me to pick a deep cut because I listen to so much Rush. It's almost none of them are deep cuts. But I'm going to go, I started with 3, Body Electric, Kid Gloves, and Red Lenses as the deep cuts for Grace Under Pressure. I'm going to go with Kid Gloves. I love them all, but Kid Gloves is the shortest one of these songs. It is deceptively complex. It sounds simple. It is not simple. There's odd time signatures in there. It's flowing through 5/4 and 4/4. Sorry, music nerds. It's got a killer bass line, a great guitar solo, a very, very cool instrumental section. Neil kind of holds it down and he keeps it pushing forward, and it deals with societal pressures. It's just a great tune, and it has been played live. Not as recent as Body Electric, but it has been played live, but it's been a while. But I'm going with Kid Gloves.
Okay, Chris, you have 1 minute.
I do. So my favorite deep cut would be Middletown Dreams. I think it should have been a hit. It's such a relatable song to so many people. I mean, even if one hasn't experienced that, it's easy to understand, much in the same way as Subdivisions. But these are stories of desperate people, whether it's the trapped salesman, the middle-aged Madonna, the aspiring musician. Again, a return to a common theme of Neil's, of that Neil need to expand and to get out and explore more, get more out of life. And there's another kind of frenzied solo section, and Alex's solo, the way he comes in, it comes in on that out of town, and his guitar is right with that. It's like, and it's almost like this screaming kind of desperate sort of solo that sort of just resolves into that beautiful melody at the end. I guess you would call it the middle 8, where it just sort of resolves into this acceptance, this resolution of the situation that's understood by every single person who'd be elsewhere if they could. And just imagine if somebody explains something to you as, well, it's not unpleasant. What does that say? And I just think it's memorable. It's hummable. It's non-threatening.
All right, we have to mute Chris.
Chris, your time.
Well over time.
Well over time.
Okay, Ralph, you're
Good with it
next.
too before.
I tried to let you finish, but had to mute you.
Ralph,
Into
it's up
my
to you. 1 minute.
time. So, deep track, Hold Your Fire, one of the most controversial Rush songs I think there is. One of the great things about Rush songs is how the music matches the lyrics. Jacob's Ladder, you feel the thunderstorm that Neil's writing about. So Alex and Geddy are the sonic landscapers of Neil's lyrics. And I think one of the best examples of that is Tai Shan. You know, I've never been to China.
Awesome.
I've never been there. But once I hear that song, I am transported. I can vision the 7,000 stairs. I can vision the writings carved in gold. You know, it's certainly deviates from the norm for a Rush song. But I think Neil gave them a challenge, and Alex and Geddy really stepped up, and that was one of their best musical feats.
Awesome.
Jerry Schramm has left the chat. Okay.
Yeah. Can we?
I got to hand it to Ralph. That's pretty solid.
Or Jim
I
wants
can agree 100%.
Jim wants to rebuttal for that.
Jim needs a rebuttal?
Jim needs a rebuttal. 30
I'm
seconds.
Gonna,
30 seconds to
okay.
rebut.
30 seconds. Go.
I'm not going to rebuttal Ralph because I agree with every single thing he said, but I want to challenge Mr. Springer over there for a motion detector. Just even look at the.
I won't disagree with you, but
yeah, I mean that's such a deep cut. It was never played live. It's such a beautiful song. It's just a opening up of people, you know, of the inside. Look at the opening lyrics. When we lift the covers from our feelings, we expose our insecure hearts. Right? I mean, it's amazing. So that's my rebuttal.
However, I
Probably
chose
not
Middletown Dreams because Middletown Dreams is a better song.
Great song.
You're feeling the burn over there, Jim. Okay.
Yeah, all right.
All right. I do have Ryder. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to put 30 seconds on your timer. I have a question. I have a out of the blue question here that I'm going to throw out all for you. And whoever wants to go first can go first. One of you mentioned moments. I forget. One of you mentioned moments in one of your answers. So I want to ask, what is the best moment on your album and why? We'll give you all like 20 seconds here to think before we start the timer, and then if no one wants to volunteer to go, well, I'll call on one of you.
20 seconds starts now.
I've got several.
One best moment. One best moment. Ralph wants to go first?
I'll go second.
All right, Ralph, your 30 seconds starts now.
I think Prime Mover, right after the bridge, they're building up, and then they just stop, and it's just Neil got the drum beat with Geddy singing. I think just the build up of that, Neil coming in, and then they just ride it out with just anything can happen. That's kills it for me on Fire.
It's awesome.
Okay. Alex?
Awesome.
Oops.
Sorry, I muted myself. Sorry. The last 20 seconds of Subdivisions is the best moment on my album by far. It's synthy. We're talking about the synth era. It's the main theme of the song. You know, Alex is ripping on the big chords. Neil is playing that really awesome alternating ride cymbal, China, boom, 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 like really fast. And then he ends with 3 really big drum solos. Yeah, the last 30 seconds or last 20 seconds or so of Subdivisions is the best moment on my album.
All right, Jim is not on mute, whereas Chris is, so we'll let Jim go next.
Very hard to pick one, but I'm going to go with the ending of Distant Early Warning. It's just a fantastic song, and you know, the ending, the band is just playing together. It's very powerful ending. They're playing a lot of hits together, like when the lyrics are going Absalom, 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 and they, you know, sort of take it out. A similar vibe to the end of Subdivisions, but sounds different. You know, sounds completely different, but I kind of get that same feeling that from the end of Subdivisions, and it sounded killer live.
All right, Chris.
Well, I could pick the Ride Out to Grand Designs as just being so different for them and so poppy, and I just freaking love it. If it doesn't dancing, you're on drugs. But I'm gonna have to say the final choruses of Marathon, the way that builds up the choir and the strings and the key change, you know, and that incredibly high note. I'm not sure what it is. It's an E or a D, I believe. The vocal harmonies, the way one starts high and then takes the lower one while Geddy comes up, it's brilliant. So I'm gonna have to say the chorus of
Nice.
the ending.
Nice.
All right, nice job on the spot. All right, so now it's time for closing thoughts here. So the point of a journey is not to arrive. This debate was a marathon. However, you digital men face the enemy within to debate for your most preferable album of the synth era. Let's disengage and turn the page and have each of you give us your closing arguments as to why your album is the most preferable of the synth era. We will go in the order we started, starting with 1982, Signals and Alex. 2 minutes this time, uninterrupted.
Well, Signals, I believe, really represents the best balance. I don't care what that Geddy guy says about, synthesizers and rock and roll. Signals demonstrates the best balance because it still has solid, fundamental guitar, bass, drums, lyrics, parts, and it also introduces very meaningful synthesizers throughout almost the entire album. It has 6 really, really solid Rush songs and 2 huge standouts. The standouts are obviously New World Man and Subdivisions, but Analog Kid, Digital Man, Chemistry, and Losing It are excellent, excellent songs. Number 2, I believe it has some of the most incredible drumming and drum sound in the entire catalog. I absolutely love the way Neil's drums sound on this album. There's not too much electronic drums. There's a little bit, but it's mostly acoustic drums that just sound fantastic. Alex has 3 standout guitar solos that are top-notch in Subdivisions, Analog Kid, and New World Man. And then there's some really, really good deep cuts in Countdown and Losing It that I've alluded to earlier that are really spectacular. Losing It being a very emotional song with a guest musician in the violin solo, which is spectacular, and then Countdown being a great deep cut, being inspired by the events of the space shuttle. So overall, not even what I mentioned earlier, not even to say that New World Man was the highest charting song that Rush ever had in the United States. They had higher charted songs in Europe and in Canada, of course, but New World Man reaching number 21 in the Billboard charts in 1982. So for me, Signals takes the cake.
All right. Jim, 2 minutes defending Grace Under Pressure.
All right. So with Grace Under Pressure, the blending of the 4 instruments is so balanced that no one instrument is taking over the sonic palette. The guitar definitely has more of a front seat than on Signals. Sorry, Alex, I love Signals, but it does. And the keyboard occupies different frequencies than the guitars do. I think I mentioned that before. Rush has been they were listening to The Police, another fantastic band. So there is definitely an influence of ska and reggae on this album. You can hear that at The Enemy Within, very, very prominent. The songs are catchy and the marriage of the musical parts is perfect, with just a beautiful balance. As far as the Holy Triumvirate and their fantastic playing goes, this is the first album that Neil introduced an electronic kit. He uses a Simmons electronic drums, and he used these to great effect without taking away from anything because he separated out the electronic and the acoustic kits. Geddy's bass playing is and remains amazing. He has some fantastic bass lines on that album, and Alex is just incredible, right? And his solos are great. The parts he does is just fantastic. And of course, he gave us the solo to Between the Wheels. Lyrically, we are touching on history with Red Sector A, with loss with After Image, desire for individuality with The Body Electric, and the Cold War, obviously, with Distant Early Warning. And of course, the Cold War was on everybody's mind. So I think that was very impactful way to open the album. The album artwork is absolutely incredible, with showing Grace on the bottom with the beautiful water and Pressure on top with the clouds, and even the little logo here that they made. So I don't know. I think just Grace Under Pressure is awesome.
No extra points for the
Perfect
sweet tattoo. No,
No extra points.
no extra points for the tattoo. Nope.
I got it. Just hit no.
He got it just for this debate.
Just for this
There you
debate.
go.
All right. Chris, defending Power Windows, 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Right. Okay. So I think that this album represents the pinnacle of everything that they were working towards after Moving Pictures. I think that in the same way, I'll fix that later. In the same way that Permanent Waves laid the groundwork for Moving Pictures and Caress of Steel laid the groundwork for 2112. I think that this laid the groundwork for everything that they did beyond it. It was a huge step forward in terms of writing melodies. Geddy really learned to sing on this album. He was just really writing incredible melodies. And it's obvious that the guys like this album as well. I don't care what certain famous rock DJs say about this period, or guys who write books about Rush say about this period, but those guys liked this album. They played 5 of the 8 tracks on the Clockwork Angels album, Clockwork Angels tour. And if you throw in Marathon from Time Machine, that's 6/8 of the album played live. And I really don't think that if Alex didn't like this album, he would have agreed to play those songs, because they're incredible songs. And I could almost say that this album is not just the best of these 4. I think it's the best of this decade, and that includes Moving Pictures. And it's not, there is a but with that. I think that Moving Pictures was more important. I think Permanent Waves was more important. But this album, I think, is incredible, and it has stood the test of time. A lot of people didn't like this album. I remember when it came out, and fighting with the older kids who had gotten me into Rush, who didn't like it, who thought it was too pop. They were trying to sell out. And I was like, the only thing they're selling out is Madison Square Garden, buddy. That's it.
All right. We will give Ralph 2 minutes to defend Hold Your Fire one last time.
And everything everybody said about those albums is true. I completely agree. And I just, Rush, one of the best things they do is never stagnate. They're always going forward, trying new things. And I think they just kept going. They had the, success of Signals, Grace Under Pressure, and the multi-platinum Power Windows. And they're still stuck to their guns. They're not trying to recreate it. They went ahead and just did what they want. And though maybe Hold Your Fire doesn't have any standout signals, you got Time Stand Still, Force 10, I think it's one of the most cohesive albums, the nuanced albums, that if you just listen from front to back, you can really hear what they're trying to do. It's subtle, the guitars, like I said, nuanced and textured. There's more intricacies with that. Geddy's bass lines really standing out. Neil's use of the electronic percussion is just, it doesn't sound electronic. It's just part of the rhythm. They've learned how to use this technology. When you hear a Hold Your Fire song, you know it's from Hold Your Fire. You know it's right where it belongs. It's very consistent. I think, like Jim said, Grace Under Pressure really Cold War feeling, but I think Hold Your Fire is as relevant today as it was in 1980, with the human element about it, the killer instinct, living the moment, wanting the world to be a perfect world, understanding it can't, but still trying, being idealistic. I think they really peaked with Hold Your Fire.
All right. Well, that wraps up our questions for the Synth Era debate here. So what we ask our followers to do now is take the, I don't know, favoritism or the politics out of it, I guess, in terms of which album you like the most, right? And try to, you know, leave a comment and try to decide who did the best, who debated for their album, you know, the best, and who you think made the best points defending their album, as everyone shows their album artwork, and Chris fixes his poster that fell off the wall. Anyways, the four of you, thank you for debating this. I think personally you all made fantastic points, every single one of you. Jerry, thanks for moderating with me. Ryder, thank you for keeping time. And yeah, again, please leave your thoughts on their thoughts in the comments. Let us know who you think won this debate. And we are actually going to take a few weeks off of Rush Roundtable for the holidays here. So I want to wish everyone, you know, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, anything you celebrate, and Happy New Year. And we will see you, Ralph with his Hold Your Fire ornament. That's awesome. We will see you the beginning of January 2022 as we start the song discussions for Signals and we progress through the synth era. So we will see you all, next year. Take care, everybody.